It's good to see everyone here this evening. If you open your Bibles, please, to Ecclesiastes, first chapter. We studied the introductory lesson where we went through kind of the theme of the book, and we'll pick up some details and may hit on that theme again as it unfolds. But I want us to look at these verses that we've already examined a little bit. And chapter 1 and verse 1, when it says, "The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem, vanity of vanities, saith the preacher." Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. You can see why someone said this is going to be a depressing book. Everything's empty, there's nothing to hold on to, and therefore this is a discouraging book to study. That's complete wrong. Sometimes it's very positive to know realities of life and how to live life. What is the phrase that we'll be looking at? Under the sun. Under the sun. That's talking about life as it is on earth and how we should be able to live with that type of life. So we'll come across this theme. We already hit it in an introductory lesson. Verse 3, "What profit hath the man in all of his labor wherein he laboreth under the sun?" You know that answer if you were here last week. What will be that answer? What profit hath the man in all of his labor that he labors under the sun? Your sons, your daughters, as they begin to live life, they need to learn this lesson. What is it? We'll see it 8 times told us what it is in the book. It is, enjoy the fruits of your labors. That's what you get out of life. Under the sun. We're not speaking about, I'm preparing for heaven. We ought to be doing that. But what we're looking at, what do you get? Profit. Hoard your money and just look at it, it's where it is, or do you spend it? Spend it righteously, but spend it. Use it. And you'll see that unfold. Because if you just talk about life, as we'll see in chapter 3, you plant and you root it all up. You build and you tear it down. What profit hath you in all your labors? You're just like a hamster in a cage. You profit nothing. Because there's the point, where do you ever make progress? You just learn to, as we talked about, give yourself the precious present. Live in the present, enjoying the fruits of your labors, and that's wisdom. In the context of God, you're going to find out the secret of life, according to Ecclesiastes. And I hope you'll see that come back and back and back at you with confirmation as we continue. So our first question, very broad, but we'll look at the pieces here because in these first 11 verses that's especially important. What do you see in generations? Meaning people come and they go. Let's say a generation is 20 years. 20 years you have a baby, you sort of 20-year generations that are taking place. The sun, the wind, the waters of the rivers, kind of a group that we'll look at together. How do they back up the preacher when he says all is vanity? And so let's answer that question first. What we mean by vanity, it means it has no substance within itself to hold on to. It's fleeing. It's gone. It's fleeing past you. We'll see that youth is like that. We'll see that money's like that. We'll see that life is like that. And that's why it says all is vanity, 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 all is vanity. Because this life is fleeing by. How are you using your life as you live under the sun? I'm talking about your religious life. I'm talking about your practical, everyday life. Of course, we live it as religious people, not taking that away, but it's life under the sun. It's wisdom, and that's what Solomon experiences all through this book. He had that opportunity with God's blessings. He had the opportunity to have wisdom. He had money. He had power. He had servants. He had gardens. He had all things, mirth and all of those things that come with living life under the sun. And we'll see what does he learn? What is important about that? So let's talk with the generations. What do you see in generations that would make, that's vanity? David? That's right. And how quick that is. As we experience life, we see that. I thought the hippie generation was going to be here all along, forever. And now I wouldn't be caught dead in those clothes, would you? That's crazy. No, that's cool. And all of those things. Styles, they come and go. Generations come and go. And what we see is the fact that because of that, that's not something, well, this generation is the generation that's the epitome of all generations. Well, it may be. That's your chosen generation. That's the greatest generation in our modern time of history, but those people are dying, aren't they? That generation is dying. And what happens, as we'll see in verse 11, there is no remembrance of the former generations. Neither shall they have any remembrance of the latter generations that are to come among those that shall come later than they will. One generation goes, one generation comes and goes. And what happens? You don't remember them. What was life for you at Calvin Coolidge was president? Can anybody tell you? You didn't live there? You didn't know what that's like? Mickey Mouse started, I know that, when Calvin Coolidge was the president. And how old is Mickey Mouse now? Well, he's the same age as my dad. He's 95 years old. Mickey Mouse is 95. And you didn't know that, did you? We forget what they had to live like. What life was like that. What was life like when we did those things? There's some in the audience that weren't born when 9/11 happened. And you weren't there when Kennedy was assassinated. All those things. That's part of their memories of a generation. But what happens? It comes and it goes. And all the peers that enjoyed that life, soon, if it's not left in the history books or some monument or something like that, we forget them. We forget them. That's reality. And it's just, as we'll see that with people dealing with the subject of death, as we'll see in the second chapter. So that's what is, if you think that's generation is the epitome of that. And everybody, like in our modern times, they appeal to that generation. They're the young generation. They're the ones that are fluent. They have the money. We will have all of our things connected with them. And realize that that's fleeing by too. And when our commercials say, we better get to the generation that are old and they're dying. We got to get the medicine out to them because there are more of them than there are the younger generations. So we'll appeal to those people. So you'll see everything about older people. And but then there's the young people and you appeal to them. That generation comes and it goes. And so that's the thing. Now what about the sun, the wind, and the waters of the rivers? How does he describe that? Verse 5. The sun, what does it do? That's right, but that's not accurate, is it? That's not really how it happens, is it?
To us it is.
To us under the sun. That's what this book is about. It was never to be a scientific book and say, well, see, he doesn't even get it. But in our world, as we see the sun rise and the sun set, we have terms like that. But the sun doesn't do that. It stays permanent. We're rotating around it. But that's a technical difference, isn't it? No, it's important because the Bible was written and we hear from a perspective of life under the sun, in which we this is how we look at it. We look at the sun rising. It's rising in the east and it sets in the west. So that's what happens. The sun goeth down and hasteth to its place where it riseth again. So he just runs all the way back over there to the east and ready to go up the next morning. And it sets. And it runs right back to get back to the place. It's a description of that because it's going to come up over there in the next morning. Why? Because that's life. That's life under the sun. That's how we live, and that's how what's our experience. And he's recognizing that is the experience. But what did it profit? What did you gain? Well, it traveled a lot of miles. Well, we turn. Sun is we're going around the sun. What was that all about? It's in terminology, as we understand it, of a life. What does the wind do? It goeth toward the south and turneth unto the north. And we see weather maps and we see television. Where's that front coming from? Come from the northwest. He'll circle down here and maybe dip down and get us some freezing temperature. And he'll go. It goes in its circuits. It turneth to the north, it turneth about continually in its course, and the wind returneth to its circuits. What about the rivers? They run into the sea, and the sea never fills up, and the rivers keep running. What's behind all that? Well, I think that's evaporation stuff. Yeah, you're right. And you know the secret to that. God doesn't tell you here. He just tells you, here's the experience. All the rivers run to the sea is not full. On the place where the rivers go, whether they go again. The rivers keep coming. All things are that's the way it is, but it just continues to go. The wind continues to take its circuits. One generation comes, one generation goes. And you begin to say, life is vanity. Why? Because it flees by and it keeps doing the same thing. And that might become monotonous. Is there any more reason for living upon this earth under the sun? And Solomon has a lot of things to say about that. Let's talk about reality of our makeup. Verse 8. All things are full of weariness. Man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Is that true? You see things, you're ready to see something else. And that's weariness. Don't you ever get satisfied? I know a preacher, he had to live a life as a bachelor most of his life, but he would send pictures because he lived by himself. He had his friends. And he would send pictures back, and he would just travel to different places. But what he would do, he's at the Leaning Tower of Pizza, and he's got his head up there and took his picture. He was there about 5 minutes, and he's gone. He did it, done it. He's done. He got all these pictures. He's experiencing a life, all the places he wanted to go, but he wanted to see things. But it's never satisfied. Our ear is never satisfied with hearing. We're ready to hear the next thing, and that's reality. And so it's weariness. I got a big old bucket list. I'm going to fill that up with the rest of my life. Well, you can do that. Then what have you accomplished at the end? You could still see some more. And you could hear some other new thought. As the Athenians, they were just ready to hear anything new. And that becomes a weariness. And so you can see why people say this is a book that's just very depressing. Weariness. Everything continues. It's monotony. Well, when you take just life in itself, it can become that. But inject God into it, it becomes a wholly different thing. You begin to say, what do I get out of this? What's the profit of all of my labor under the sun? And he keeps coming back to that. David?
That is only looking at the surface. You're no better than me than the person who scans the headline and doesn't read any deeper than the headline.
That's true.
You don't get the whole story. But if you only look at it like that, like you say, it's putting God in there. God is Solomon, with wisdom given to him, especially by God. He sees all this stuff as a repetitiveness of how fleeting things are, and in that regard, that's how he sees them as good.
That's right. And he'll put in God there pretty early in the book to show where the profit comes from. Okay, so that's dealing with that, and why that is all is vanity, is because it's fleeing by. But in this context, we learn how long the earth will abide, and how long does it abide? What does verse 4 say? Forever. What does forever mean to you? It means forever. Everlasting to everlasting. And see, the world's always going to exist. It's never going to go out of the way. That's why when you come back, when heaven is going to be on earth, it's going to be on earth, and because it abides forever. The Watchtower tells me so. And realize, does it have a context? And does the word forever have a context not only in this chapter, but does it ever have a context in the broader chapters of the Bible, and it does. So let's see if we can make some sense out of this. First of all, in this context, that when one generation comes and one generation goes, and we see the generation, the next generation is going to forget that, what's still existing when that generation is passing by? The earth. The earth. The rivers go down, they fill up, and it just continues years after years, generation after generation. What's still existing? The earth. It's in a context of these things that do not abide, and in comparison, the earth abideth forever. And we begin to realize, well, what else abides forever? What else do we see abiding forever? Let's look at Genesis, the 9th chapter, and verse 16, when we see God is not going to destroy the world by a flood anymore. And he said, the bowl shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that's upon the earth. So there's the everlasting promise, or the covenant. I will not destroy the world by a flood again. Has he kept that promise? He says it's forever. Well, forever, as long as the earth will be allowed to last, is the point. And he's fulfilled that promise. But have there been floods? Yes. We can attest to that. But it didn't destroy the world. He fulfilled his promise. And the earth continues to abide after all of these floods. I'm just going to look quickly at things that abide to grab home a point. Look at Genesis 49 and verse 26. And we could read a lot about this subject, but here's one passage that I think is worth looking at. The blessings of our father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors upon the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. Everlasting hills. That's part of this earth. They're everlasting. They will continue to be there, and those hills continue to be there. Those mountains continue to be there as one generation comes and goes, as the rivers go down the sea and everything fills up. We see that all the time. But look at Exodus 29, and this is where we have a number of passages dealing with the priesthood of Aaron. In Exodus 29, I think I may have that right. Let's look at Exodus 40, Exodus 40 and verse 15. I know that's the one I wanted. Exodus 40 and verse 15. Here you have all the details. You talk about, when you read those last part of Exodus in your daily Bible reading, if you ever get there, the point is these details of everything connected with making the tabernacle and bringing it out in pieces for Moses to have to put together. It's kind of interesting to see what all the material for the priesthood and all of that was there. But in chapter 40 and verse 15, thou shalt anoint them as thou didst anoint their father, that they may minister unto me in the priest office, and their anointing shall be to them for an everlasting priesthood throughout their generations. Everlasting priesthood. What does Hebrews teach us? Jesus came from the Aaronic priesthood family. Who's our high priest? It didn't Aaron and his sons. That ended. It's an everlasting priesthood. It'd be forever and ever. Anything that's allowed to last forever can last forever. But the priesthood was never going to be forever. It's going to be forever as it lasts. And it has a context of limitation. And what doesn't have a context of limitation that is everlasting? God. God is eternal. He's from everlasting to everlasting. Psalm 90 and verse 2 speaks about that characteristic of God. And of course, we've got plenty of New Testament passages that teach that too. But in Psalm 90 in verse 2 of the praise unto God, like everlasting to everlasting is who God is. Before the mountains were brought forth, even that everlasting hill over there, or forever thou hast formed the earth and the world, and from everlasting to everlasting thou art God. What does Peter tell us? That when the Lord comes back again, he will melt this earth. The earth shall be destroyed, and he'll melt with fervent heat. It's not going to abide forever. And forever in the sense that there's no end to it. But when things are set forth as God, and he's everlasting, he doesn't end. He never ends. But the priesthood ended. This world is going to end. The hills are going to end. And those things you begin to realize when I see the terminology, for example, in Jude 6, this helps us understand the eternal fires of hell. And people say, well, hell is not going to be eternal fire. And this is the passage they go to. In like manner, these also in their dreamings defile the flesh and set it not dominion and rail at dignities. So what are they going to experience? Verse 7 says, they are set forth as an example, suffering the punishment of eternal fire. And he uses the people here of Sodom and Gomorrah. Are the fires still burning in Sodom and Gomorrah? Are they? God burnt them to the ground. Are the fires still burning? It's eternal punishment, and therefore, some will say, Homer Haley said this, that indeed hell is not eternal punishment in fire. We're going to be annihilated. And this is his passage. Well, we've got to realize forever has a context. Anything that cannot abide forever, like a fire, having literal fire that cannot, when it runs out of stuff to burn, it ends. But it's the everlasting punishment of the fire that happened at Sodom and Gomorrah. That's how he describes our eternal punishment. And we usually go, I'll tell you, eternal punishment in Matthew 25, that means it's not, you got everlasting life and everlasting punishment. Well, Sodom was an example of everlasting fire punishment. Must that in? And so people take those doctrines and they run off with it. But the point is, everything is everlasting as long as it is allowed, has the capability of existing forever. Does your spirit have the capability of existing forever? Yes. And we're going to experience that punishment. We'll be destroyed. And hellfire doesn't mean it's going to be, we're annihilated. But this passage is used, and that's why we need to come to grips with everlasting. That which is capable of everlasting, it can be everlasting. But a fire burning in Sodom and Gomorrah is going to run out of things to burn, and it's no longer burning there. But that doesn't mean that the fires that God has set forth is going to be quenched. Did he do a kind of a bush that kind of burned and didn't be consumed? God can do that. He's reserved everlasting punishment in that hell fire place where there's no end of the gnashing of teeth. It's forever. Are we capable of that? God has made us capable of eternity. And therefore, everything has a context. And when you recognize that, you will also recognize the truth of the scriptures, that you don't violate the context. And our Watchtower friends do that every time. They said, earth abide forever. It says that in Ecclesiastes 1. Don't you believe your Bible? Yeah, I do. In the context of all the things that are going by the wayside. And by the way, the earth will be destroyed as well when the Lord comes back again. How long will the earth abide? As long as God wills it to, is my answer. What is yours? You have another one? It says it's forever. Priesthood was forever, but it ended with the priesthood of Christ. And we're living with that as now. Okay? Question number 3. The book of Ecclesiastes is pessimistic in its outlook on life. And you realize, I don't like that, but if you like it, say it. Pessimistic. The book is just pessimistic. Okay. It's realistic in its outlook on life. It's realistic, like we live under the sun. Preacher, you've been kind of leaning that way. Or is this a better one? It's instructive in showing man life under the sun is best lived in the context of acknowledging and honoring God. Doesn't that take in all 12 chapters? Life under the sun, reality, is best lived because everything's fleeing by. How do I get anything out of this life? It's like that. It's best lived in the context of acknowledging, not just, oh, there's a God, and honoring God. And so when we see phrases that remember your Creator in the days of your youth, enjoy your youth, remember your Creator in the days of thy youth, because it's fleeing by. That's honoring God, not when we become middle-aged. It's young people that do that. And God has given you this gift. And we'll see that in the second chapter. This is God's gift to you, to enjoy the fruits of your labors. That's all you get out of life, as far as living under the sun. And so it's not a pessimistic outlook of life. It's how we should live that life. And he says, rejoice. Anoint your head with oil. Put on your white garments. And live joyfully with the wife whom thou lovest all the days of thy life. Live joyfully with that ball and chain. That's the way some people look at marriage. Not God. Live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your life of vanity. It's fleeing by. If you don't enjoy those days, you didn't get what you could have out of life if you honored God. And that's why this book is so important to us. The modernity there is just seeking for application, because it's God's wisdom. Anybody like to, you think it's still pessimistic? Because we see it's what a grievous thing we're exercised with. It's laborious to say I see things and I want to see more, and I can't ever fill it up. But it's in a context that's greater than that, as you've already pointed out. Who is the preacher? And this, we talked a little bit about this, but if you were just to read this book, what does the book want you to believe the preacher is? It is Solomon. It was fit with his wisdom, and it fits. He was the son of David, and he was king in Jerusalem. And that's kind of what he sets forth there. And Solomon was. Well, of course, the word in the Hebrew language is koheleth, and what we have here, the book of Ecclesiastes, is indeed the Greek version of that Hebrew word, and it's just translated to the preacher. That's who it is. And Solomon is preaching, not preaching to you or down at you, but it's proclaiming the wisdom of God and living life under the sun. And that's what we're trying to see there. A verse, we see those two verses. The preacher was king over Israel in Jerusalem, verse 12. Preacher, verse 1, son of David, king in Jerusalem. And so some said, well, he just took the wisdom. There was another author, and he just used Solomon's name and all of that, but it really wasn't Solomon that wrote it. Well, that's a jump. Why do you have to take that jump? And we'll go through this book, and I think it can still be Solomon all the way through. And we'll look at those points that said, maybe not. And we'll talk about that. But right now, it's not a problem. When I look at the book, it's that way. So that's who the preacher. Now, question number 5. What did the preacher conclude about some works done under the sun after he applied his wisdom? And I guess the key would be what verse? 13. I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom. Or I applied my heart. And it says, concerning all that is done under heaven, it is a sore travail that God hath given to the sons of men to be exercised therewith. See, I told you it's pessimistic. No, it's a sore travail, and he's going to take you on a journey, and you go one route, you go another route, and it all ends up being vanity if you don't understand the reality of way we should look at things. So, but here's the point that we're exercised therewith of using wisdom, and it's a sore travail, American Standard says. It's a wearisome, troublesome thing that we are exercised therewith of using wisdom and to try to learn things from it. And that becomes the important thing. So I've seen all the works that are done under the sun, and he's going to be telling you about them in his second chapter, beginning. And you'll see why it's travail, it's sore. That way, when you realize there's no profit from all that, they don't get anything out of that. When they make something their God, and they seek after it, and that's their goal in life, and we'll talk about that as well. Any comments on that? Verse 14 says, I've seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and is striving after wind. There's nothing to latch hold of substance. It's a wearisome thing to seek out this wisdom under the earth of all the things that you could experience. And I think that's reality. But it's the way God has set things up, and we're supposed to turn to him. Question 6. What also did a preacher know when he sought to know wisdom? Or 17. Or go ahead. I didn't see your hands. Go, David. All right, striving after. That's true. So I can't hold on. I see the effects of it, but I can't. There's nothing of substance there to do that. I picked for 17. I applied my heart to know wisdom, and in doing that, to wisdom, you need to look at the other side of the picture: madness and folly. Madness, that's not being wise. Folly, that's not all its levity. Get serious about life. Wisdom will make you see. I want to see exactly what it's like and what I can learn from that. And so I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly, and I perceived that this also was doing what? A striving after wind. And that's nothing of substance. All that work. And then question number 7. What goes along with gaining much knowledge and wisdom in matters done under the sun? There's grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth what? See, I told you it's pessimistic. So you see why someone would say that, and do it. But when you go through the book, you realize if that becomes your goal, and we'll see one about wisdom. He starts off with wisdom. The wisest man in all the world. If you make wisdom your goal, you've already seen that's a lot of labor, applying wisdom to everything in life, trying to see how things work and how they work out and what can they could produce. And you realize that when it's all done, it's just a sore travail. It's that way. And what do we see about? Well, you at least learned you had wisdom. And notice what he says in verse 10 of chapter 2. And we'll get into more detail this next time. It says, whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy. So there's mirth and folly is going to be coupled here with wisdom. And we're seeing the details here. And my heart rejoiced because of all my labor. And this was my portion from all my labor. That's the key. What was my portion in all my labor? I enjoyed it. God has given us all things to enjoy in the New Testament, by the way. But you don't make money your God. You enjoy what he's given us. Then I looked on all the works of my hands and wrought on the labor that I had labor to do, and behold, all was vanity and striving after wind. There was no profit under the sun. I turned myself to behold wisdom and madness and folly. For what can man do that cometh after the king, even that which hath been done long ago? There's nothing new under the sun. We saw that in chapter 1. We didn't have a question about that, but everything repeats. History repeats itself, and at each generation. He said, I saw the wisdom excelleth folly, as far as light excelleth darkness. And he says, the wise man's eyes are in his head, and the fool walketh in darkness, and yet I perceive that one great event happened to them all. What is it? Death. What happens in death? Thank you. Right. But we don't care. We forget your death. That's hateful, isn't it? You're forgotten. No, I did this great thing. That was a monument. Well, they tore that down. It kind of didn't work with our society today. So you won't have a monument. It's been melted, sorry. Well, all the peers are gone. Everybody's lived life. And it said, one event happened to all, as it happens to the fool, so will it also happen to me. And why was I then more wise? Reality hits. And kind of at first, I've had people say, why do you think Ecclesiastes ought to be for young people? It deals with death. I'm not going to let my child see death until they get to be grown up. They're not going to the funeral, I'll tell you that. They're not going to see that casket. They're not going to do that. And what happens here is that he points to death, and when he says to the youth in Ecclesiastes 12, he speaks to the youth. His book is for the youth. And what are two wonderful adult realities that a child would be good to be brought up with? Death and the judgment. I don't want to talk to my child. I'm not talking about a little infant that's innocent. I'm not talking about that, but the idea of just keeping young children away from the reality of death. Those are adult eye-openers. And he writes to children, he writes to young people, and he tells them about death, and he tells them about the judgment. And that's what we're going to be seeing here. Right now we're looking at the first part of this book about death, and we're going to see in chapter 3 about judgment. All that, a child needs to, there's responsibility for my actions before God. And I'm not in control of life. But I don't want to make money. I don't want to make wisdom. I don't want to make all these pursuits that men go after. I don't want to make them my God, because I will lose on that one. That's a striving after win. What have I gained at the end? I'll be soon forgotten like the fool was. Why was I then more wise? And that's something we want to close with and think about. Any comments you might have to add? It's a short lesson, but those are some of the details. And we're going to see in chapter 2, beginning with mirth, and he had all of the enjoyment of life as well. And it ends up the same. Those are two things that he brings out that says, don't make those things your God. Okay. Lesson 2, Lord willing, next time, we have singing, I guess, between that. We'll be switching on Sundays pretty soon, so we'll be, but lesson 2 will be our next one. Thank you.